Hello, everybody. I'm Kevin Allen, the hockey writer at USA Today, and I'm joined by my podcast partner, Tom Laidlaw, the former NHL defenseman for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles King. And this is the Laidlaw and Allen podcast, coming to you every Monday and Wednesday to talk about all things hockey. And today, Tom, and we've been down this road before, it's time to talk about Don Cherry. Saturday night, he stepped in it again, as we like to say. By saying something that certainly didn't seem to be in keeping with the, NHL all-inclusive policy that they have. And why don't you were actually listening? I didn't see it live, and you did. Tell us about what you saw.
Just a little background in case people don't understand who Don Cherry is. So Don Cherry was a player, minor league player, coached the Boston Bruins many years ago, and has had this show. Coach's Corner on Hockey Night Canada on Saturday night, and it is like he is. I guess you'd call it almost like a religion there, right? I mean, more people stay there to watch his show, that 4 minutes that he's on with Ron MacLean, than they do watch the hockey games. He's always got something controversial to say, just as he did on Saturday night. So he's a big patriot. So just so you understand, he loves the country of Canada. He loves hockey. He has no problem expressing that on a daily basis. And he got into talking about people buying poppies, the poppies that people wear on their lapel in remembrance of Armistice Day and Veterans Day. And he got into talking, I think his quote was, "You people that come here," obviously pointing the finger at immigrants, "don't buy the poppies." So he was trying to say that the rest of the Canadians all buy poppies and that the immigrants that come here do not buy the poppies. So first of all, kind of a broad statement. And there's really no way of proving any accuracy to it. And obviously, the league, as you mentioned, is doing their best to really make the game, and rightfully so, not just because of the game, but all inclusive for everybody. So him to kind of separates the immigrants from everybody else, obviously very inflammatory. And Don Cherry's got himself in trouble again.
Yeah, and the big question is how he survives, and I guess how he survives is just for the reason you said. He's an institution. He's been doing this for a long time, and he has a very conservative base. Like, I would draw a comparison between him and President Donald Trump in the United States in terms of they have this very devout collection of followers. And I would say that Don Cherry it's the same type of followers, very conservative. And they support those kinds of things. And even though, as you said, to suggest that, that those people, as Don would call them, don't wear poppies, it's just kind of a ludicrous, statement. He has no idea. And the other issue that I find remarkable is, he has a long history of this. As someone pointed out to me just recently, that he said exactly the same thing 28, 29 years ago, but it blew over. And I'm sure that he's thinking this will blow over as well. But it's, I don't know. Have we reached that point in Canada if he were in the United States, Tom, don't you think he'd have been fired a long time ago?
Well, yes, but here's the thing. It's like he's the 82-year-old guy who's a patriot for Canada, who loves hockey, like you said, has a history of making these comments. So a lot of people, when he makes these kind of comments, go, well, that's just Don Cherry. First of all, he can't really prove that. They kind of laugh at those things. And that's why people tune in so much to watch his show. That 4 minutes is the most watched television in Canada. It was for a while. I think it still is now. People want to see what he's going to say next, and he's done it again. Now, the network isn't going to back him up and say he said the right thing. Obviously, they're going to say he said the wrong thing. But the reality is now people are going to watch even more. They want to see what he's going to say next. There's those group of people that don't like him, same as Donald Trump, those group of people that don't like him, but they always want to hear what he's going to say next. And that's the same thing with Don Cherry. So I'm sure he didn't want it to come out the way he did. Again, I don't condone it at all. It was wrong what he said. But knowing him, he loves his hockey. He loves Canada so much. He's viewing it when he's saying it that he's being pro-Canada. He's not understanding what he's doing to other people by making those kind of statements. And first of all, like you said, totally, you can't even say that those statements are accurate. So I think it's a lot of people are just going to go, oh, well, that's Don Cherry again.
Yeah, and you pointed this out as well. Like he considers himself a super patriot, and he's very supportive of the military. Long has been. And he always has causes when there's a player injured, especially a youth player. He's always a big booster and trying to do all that you can for someone who's injured while playing the sport of hockey. He has done good in his life and in his role as Don Cherry, but he just goes off the rails. And this has crept into other areas. He was anti foreign player for a lot of years. Right. I think he certainly backed off on that with certain players who played what he considered a North American style. But he has such a long history. He's been a real mixed bag, but he is part of Canadian culture now.
Yes.
I think he's actually, I believe I'm right. I believe he's 85. I think you're not giving him enough credit. And there's nothing new with Don Cherry anymore. He's not going to surprise you. He is what he is. This people tune in because, I think there is some comfort that people get from seeing him still on Hockey Night in Canada, Coach's Corner, still promoting the tough guy hockey that he does. But I'm not sure. I think if there's ever a shot that this could be the end of the line, I think it might be this one. I don't know why. It's just a feeling I have. But what do you think? Do you think he's going to survive this?
Well, I think he'll survive this unless there's a bigger uproar. If more people jump on this bandwagon against Don Cherry, I think they'll be forced to do something here. If it's just one of these things that's a story for 48 hours or whatever, and then it blows over, then I think he'll be fine. In fact, again, I think the network will kind of like secretly be going, "Oh, that's good. That's going to boost our ratings even more." But if it continues on longer than that, and it depends what the NHL does too. Like you mentioned, the NHL is really big on the diversity, making sure the game is inclusive to everybody, so that it helps grow the game. But it's also a great cause, right? I mean, both our countries, Canada, the U.S., are so diverse, so many different races and everything are playing hockey, playing sports in general, and all the other things. I think the NHL views themselves, and rightfully so, as a source of kind of bringing people together and making sure that everybody's included in this. So they may have some say in this too. But again, I just think it's how much do people jump all over it? Like I said, he's such an institution in Canada. And I just think that, if he's not there, there's going to be as much of an uproar as if he is there. Those people that like him so much are going to be like, why, you kidding me? We don't have Don Cherry now because of those comments. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next 48 hours.
Well, and I think you're right about that. I think though everyone will be monitoring what happens over the next 24 hours to see if there is, further uproar on it. And I did check this morning because I wanted to know. The NHL has no contractual say in the hiring of announcers. Now, that doesn't mean they can't do some arm twisting. But how much can they really do? I guess is the big question. I mean, clearly he's not what they want in a face for hockey. I mean, maybe some things he does they would be happy about, but for the most part, I think they would rather see somebody else in that role. But
you think they'd rather see somebody else?
Yeah, I do.
I think he's viewed as that's such a like a hockey, like you said, he's an institution, especially up in Canada.
Yeah, but I think, and again, I'm just reading the tea leaves. I've really never talked to anyone about this, but I see it as the NHL would like to, they're kind of modernizing the game.
Yeah.
And, I think they'd rather see someone else and sort of establish as kind of a new guy. Look, he can't do this forever. I mean, he's 85. So, even if he was the perfect guy in the world at some point, they have to start thinking about, moving him. So I will say this. I agree with you too on this part of it. The day, if he is fired, that day, that will be the biggest story.
Absolutely.
Because
there'd be an uproar. Like a lot of his fans would be outraged if he's not there. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And does anyone want to be known as the guy who fired Don Cherry? I doubt it. So,
if Kevin Allen isn't, like, you open up the USA Today and you don't see Kevin Allen there writing, that's like people be outraged.
Well, and speaking of that, I am actually writing about Don Cherry today. So that'll be, I'm talking to people about that when I did before, and I'll do after this podcast. Anyway, let's move on. I think both of us agree that we're going to have to follow this over the next 24 hours, and I want to talk about a very important injury. It seems like we've been talking about those too often this season, but Mitch Marner with a high ankle sprain, and we've talked about the significance of injuries, but I think this is huge because this guy's a penalty killer. He's their top playmaker. I kind of felt when Austin Matthews was going to be the guy in Toronto, and look, he's a heck of a player, and I'm going to take anything away from him. But I sort of feel Mitch Marner's the guy in Toronto. So, just because he does so many things for that team, I think given their struggles right now, this injury is huge to lose him for a month.
See, I think it's huge, but I'm going to go the opposite way. I think it's huge. It's going to be a great thing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think they've got so much talent on that team with Tavares there and Nylander and the cast of characters they've got. I just think that it's almost like there's not enough ice time to go around. There's only one puck, and that there's so many talented guys there. I think they need more than one puck with that team. So I think he's going to come out of the lineup. I think Austin Matthews will play better. I think there'll be more ice time for all the other players. They'll get more done. They'll improve as a team. Maybe they'll learn to play better defensively now. Because it was 2 weeks ago that Ovechkin went into Toronto and made those famous quotes talking about how they need to learn how to play as a team. And their coach Babcock agreed with those comments. So I think if anything, him coming out of the lineup is going to force them to play better as a team, and they're going to learn more. And I think they have plenty of talent there. No question, you're dead on right. He is a fantastic player and leaves a hole there. But I just think they've got enough talent there to fill in the hole, and they may end up being a better hockey team when it's all done. Yeah,
I mean, we've seen that before when a team loses a significant player, that everybody gets on the oars and kind of moves it forward. But I think this is he's such a significant player, so it's going to be interesting to see. And I mean, don't you feel like a little bit like the Maple Leafs are kind of in a crosswords might be too strong, but they're at a period where it's time for them to move ahead. Like they've got to do something and kind of show that they're a leading contender.
And there's a lot of questions that people are saying, is Mike Babcock the coach? Is he the right coach for that hockey team? He's been known for years as being the guy that gets the most out of his players all the time. And I don't think that's necessarily the case here in Toronto right now. Now, is that because of the players, or is that his fault? Has the game changed and he hasn't evolved? I don't know what it is, but I just don't see, I'm not crazy about that team. I look at it on paper and it's a fantastic hockey team, but I watched them play and there's a lot of nights they're disinterested. The defensive play isn't very good. I think you're right. I think there's some decisions we made there with that hockey team. Okay, do we have the right mix here, or do we just have to be patient, let them evolve, let them mature as players and as a team? Or again, do we just not have the right leader behind the bench?
When you look at the New York Islanders and success they have, and then you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, did the Maple Leafs make the wrong decision when they let Lamoriello go and decided to bring in Kyle Dubas?
Well, that's a tough one. Everything I heard about Dubas, I mean, he's the game has evolved too, right? With the analytics and everything, he's certainly that young, intelligent guy that embraces the analytics. Not that Lou Lamoriello does not, but that's a tough one to let Lou go. I think it was more one of those cases where Brendan Shanahan, the president and former player, was faced with a decision that if he didn't, give Kyle Dubas that job, Dubas was going to leave and go someplace else. So he had to make that decision. I think the biggest thing, and Lou's smart, he's taking advantage of it. Like losing Toronto with the Islanders when Lou took over, Lou handled, we talked this before, he handled that fantastically, almost like to bind everybody together, like it was us against the world mentality when you're the Islanders. You lost supposedly the star of your franchise now everybody's thinking, the team's going to fall apart. If anything, Lou stepped in, hired a great coach. I know you're cousins with the coach there, Barry Trotz. But he just has that mentality that, okay, he's gone, it's time to move on, and they've been fantastic. So, interesting parallels between those two teams.
Well, what's interesting about that whole Islanders situation is that the Islanders fans, the Islanders fans don't get enough credit for how zealous they are in their fandom. Like they get downright angry. Like Toronto fans, if you say something negative about your team, you will hear it. And Philadelphia fans are very similar. A lot of bases, they don't get as worked up about it. There are a lot of angry fans in Philadelphia and Toronto. But the Islanders, they're right there with them. I did not believe that was a good decision to let Robin Leonard go and bring in Varlamov. I thought it was going to undercut all the progress they'd made there, and that's what I thought. But it turned out I was wrong. I mean, and the reason I was wrong is that my, as you call him, my cousin, even though we're not related, continues to do an incredible job there, and their goaltending. The statistics are so similar. You have to draw the conclusion that it's more of a system thing than a goaltending thing. You plug in the right goalie, as long as he's playing well, they do fine, and they've continued to be the same team. Now, I just didn't see that coming. So I think they've done an incredible job there in Island. And now the fans are, by the way, the Islander fans after that last podcast are happy that I'm such a believer in their coach. So even though they disliked me considerably at the start of the season, some of them now at least are happy with me because I'm a huge believer in Lamoriello and Barry Trotz, even though I was not a believer in Varlamov.
Yep. I agree totally. Yes, totally. We got next. We were going to touch on Evander Kane, didn't we? In his
Yeah. Were you ever a gambler when you played?
No. Well, I'll tell you a really quick story. I first came in 1980, 81, and there's guys like John Davidson, Eddie Johnson, Steve Vickers, and those guys. They invited me over to John Davidson's house one night, and it wasn't big money, but we played poker, and I lost $250. Now back then, we made $60,000 was my first year's salary in the National Hockey League, so $250. I woke up the next day. And I don't even like poker. I don't know what I'm doing. I just want to be one of the boys. And they were laughing at me. They took $250. It was a great lesson for me. I've never enjoyed gambling and have not gambled since then.
Well, I do. I have not done any significant stories about this, but I know from doing Jeremy Roenick's book and from other books that I've done that there's a lot of card playing that goes on in the National Hockey League, and guys do enjoy going to the casino. And we know Jaromir Jagr has some of his issues have cropped up, and so we know that. So none of this is foreign. Guys like to use the casino, and Evander Kane, of course, now is being sued. I believe he owes $500,000. Is that correct?
The story is,
yeah, and that's the report, the allegation that he owes $500,000. He's now being sued by a casino. But here's the key part of this story, and I think this will shock people. This is none of the league's business. Like most people think, oh man, if you're gambling, you're in trouble. No. You're allowed to gamble.
Sure.
That's your business, what you want to do, and that's not going to get them in any trouble with the league. They won't have any participation in this.
As long as you're not gambling on NHL games, though, right?
Pardon me? As long as you're not betting. That's the point where I was going to make.
Okay, right.
You got to stay away from all that kind of stuff. But if you're just going to casino and gambling,
right,
that's between you and your wife, or you and whoever you're going on. And I guess the only concern would be if this starts to be a problem for you, then it becomes a team problem, and then maybe there'll be some sort of intervention.
It happened last year in the playoffs when they were playing Vegas in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's right.
Guys aren't going to sit in the room the whole time. Maybe you're in Vegas, he's gambling, but you run up a $500,000 bill. I know it's a lot of money, but a couple of questions: why haven't you just paid the bill?
Yeah, well, that is a significant amount. That's that's $1 million of his pay, because that's after tax money. Right. So I'm sure maybe he didn't have it. I don't know what his financial situation is, or maybe he disputes, for all we know. Maybe he disputes that he owes that. I don't know. We don't know the answer to that, but I do think like we talked. Did we get to the cocaine usage story last time?
No, we didn't talk about that. No.
Okay, well, let's tie these two together.
Yeah.
The Athletic did an interesting story. Katie Strang wrote about the fact that of drug use, mollies and cocaine, and she quoted some anonymous sources and then some people on the record saying that it's become a bit of a problem. And if I'm sort of interpreting her story, which was very well done. But basically what I got from that is the problem in the NHL mirrors the problem in society. If whatever it is, if 8% of the people in the United States have sampled that's probably what's going on in the NHL. And there are, kind of some issues here. And Tom, you're a former NHL player. Is any of that shocking to you?
You said it very well. If something's going on in society, why would you think it would not be going on in the National Hockey League or the NFL? And then issues like that, I hate to say it, maybe even more so because now the money that players have to be able to spend on the recreational drugs, is even greater. It's not that big of a deal to them. So it does not surprise me at all. When I played, I think there was, I believe, limited drug use. I think there would be more now, but again, I have no facts of that. It was more like drinking was more of an issue back then. Now they've had a lot of issues with. I know I've been an agent in a few years now, but some of the meetings we had with the Players Association, some of the issues were, the sleeping pills too. The guys, after a game, you're wound up and everything. They want to sleep. They get on a plane or go back to their rooms or home, and they were taking sleeping pills. And guys were getting hooked on the sleeping pills. It's a tricky thing because your schedule is, you're getting all wired up and the adrenaline's pumping through your veins to play a game. Now all of a sudden the game's over at 10 o'clock. You shower. You're dealing with the media. You want to get a good night's rest, but you can't sleep. Some guys can't sleep till 2 or 3 in the morning. Then they get up, got to go to practice the next day. So they again, is either drinking or prescription sleeping pills that have become a problem as well. So no surprise to me that when you hear that kind of story.
One thing I think is different now, I wonder if you agree with this. We've talked before about the fact, like nutrition is such a huge thing, and guys now just work year round and staying in shape, and they all have personal coaches and so forth. I would think that people who are recreational drug users keep that hidden from teammates.
Yeah, totally.
Because I think teammates today, would be confrontational. Right. Because they do it on nutrition. I've talked to several guys now who've said, if they're not eating right, somebody on the team will say, hey, clean up your act a little bit. Try to be a real player. If they're going out and eating nachos and chili fries and all the stuff that was probably
same thing with the drinking too. I mean, it used to be back in the day, not that it was right, but back in the 70s and 80s and beyond, it was, that was part of the culture of the game. And it was guys getting together after practice and after games and having a few beers together. In fact, there's all these legendary stories about like the Edmonton Oilers back in the 80s when they'd go on a long road trip. They were all required to stop someplace and all have a beer together when they got back before they went to their homes. Even though they'd been on the road for maybe 2 weeks together, it was that culture of being together. It wasn't as much the drinking a beer; it was all the guys being together. So now that has really changed. And if guys are seen as drinking, especially like a night before a game or whatever, having a glass of wine, it's really frowned upon. In fact, I was talking to a player who just retired a couple of years ago. And we were talking about that, and he's trying to, not that he's trying to condone drinking, but he's trying to get the guys to relax a little bit more. He's working with an NHL team, just to enjoy the whole process, like of being a National Hockey League player, not be so uptight about everything all the time. And that comes with experience. You're a lot of young players, many more young players in the games now. They're playing big roles, and they don't want to be seen as that guy that is, not being dedicated to his team. Whereas, some people would argue, well, listen, let's get all the team together, like do it all together as a team. That's part of the issue too now, is that it isn't as much of a team off the ice as it used to be. It was required after games and after practices that everybody get together on most teams in the National Hockey League back in the 80s when I played.
Yeah, that's amazing too, because that mentality, it reminded me when you told me those stories in the past. In the old days when softball was such a big thing in America and everybody played for a softball team, you were always sponsored by a bar, and you'd always be on everybody on the team. Support our sponsors. Like get to the bar right after the game. And that kind of thing. It reminded me of, like you said, you got to get out and be part of the team by going out to drink. And now today, the attitude would be, you got to stay out of bars, for the team's sake.
And I guess that kind of leads then, okay, so what are you doing? The guys now are doing cocaine. And again, I think when we say guys are doing cocaine, like you said, it's a reflection of society. It means it's a minority. It's not like all the guys are out there doing cocaine.
I think the fact that Kuznetsov ended up on social media now has sort of brought it to the forefront that there is a small problem. Now, there was some suggestion that it's increasing. I have no idea whether that's true or not. But
I'm with you. Like you touched on it too. These guys in their conditioning now, I have a hard time to believe there's that many guys.
Right.
They pay so much attention to what they put into their bodies now. I got to believe it's a very small percentage of guys.
All right, well, let's change topics before we have to close it off here, because I want to talk about Dustin Byfuglien and the complication of what's going on there. And it's turned out to be far more complicated, Tom, than anybody realized, because now you have the contention by the Byfuglien camp that he's been hurt, and even though he was when he had his postseason physical, he was deemed to be fine. It's his contention that the team knew that he had problems all last season dealing with a bad ankle. And so now it's a matter of, like he says, look, I fully intended to play this season, but my ankle was just so bad that I got discouraged and I decided not to play. And I think it comes down to whether or not he can get paid, for not playing. But now the big question is, what happens? I mean, there's been some talk like the first of the year, we'll get this cleaned up, but do they want him to come back now? Do they want to trade him? And if you're out there, do you want Byfuglien if you're not sure his heart is in it? And, because this is a very effective player. Like, people, when he was in Chicago, the thought was, well, he has a hard time staying below 260 and all that. Well, then all of a sudden people started to realize, number one, very popular in the dressing room. Guys like him.
Yep.
He's physical. He's intimidating. Huge shot. And he's effective. He's effective at 260 pounds. So then it doesn't matter if he's at 260. Now, does he have some conditioning issues? Well, yeah, but there are other players that have them as well. So, how do you sort all that out? And I see Kevin Cheveldayoff being careful with what he says, and I get it.
Well, and you add to, from the Winnipeg Jets standpoint, you add to the fact that they traded away Trouba to the New York Rangers, fantastic defenseman. They lost Myers, another good defenseman, all right-handed shots. So they've lost Byfuglien, Trouba, and Myers. Myers signed as a free agent with Vancouver. So as a big hole on the right side, and a defense that was pretty good, probably one of the top defenses in the National Hockey League. So just to be clear, so like you mentioned it earlier, when the player, when the season is over with, he does a interview and a physical with the team doctor and the trainer, and the three of them sign off on the exit. There's a form that they sign off on saying that in this case that the player was healthy and ready to play. I think what's really gotten Byfuglien in trouble is that if you're saying that you still want to get paid and you've got an injury, you've got to come into camp and get a physical done. We'll start a training camp the next season. He did not do that. He just stayed home. I guess the story is he was contemplating retirement. Then all of a sudden he realized, well, geez, I'm not going to get paid here. So now I've got to address this issue that it was an injury and I need to get surgery done. And he got surgery done. Now, what's important too is that the National Hockey League here, they don't want a precedent being set that this can happen again. If they let this slide and just say, okay, we'll let this player get paid now, then that opens up the door to other players doing the same thing. And the whole process that they have put in place now goes down the tubes. The reason they have these, everybody sign off at the end of the season that he's either fit to play or injured. And that then determines, okay, for next season, then if he's injured, then he's injured and he can still get paid. If he shows up injured at next training camp and he wasn't injured at the end of the season, then he can't get paid. It's a non-hockey injury at that point. Well, I guess unless he's training for playing. So there's a lot going on here. It isn't just about Byfuglien. It's about set a precedent on both sides, and the Players Association side and on the NHL side. So it is a big deal. And you're right. That's why everybody's being so quiet about it.
Yeah, and as you mentioned too, the loss of him as a player has really been significant for a team that's in a real difficult division, and a team that a couple of years ago we were thinking by now they would be a prime Stanley Cup contender, and right now it doesn't feel like that.
And their defense was going to be excellent. Like Trouba is a fantastic player with the Rangers. You mentioned Byfuglien, all the things he can do. Myers, a big defense. You look at St. Louis last year when they won. Their big mobile defense was probably one of the, not the main reason, but there's one of the reasons they won the Cup. And I think Winnipeg was right in that category, but they don't have that defense right now.
Yeah, that's for sure. And not knowing what's going to happen with Byfuglien also. It puts them in a bad spot. Do they make a trade? Do they not? What are they going to do? So I think they're going to have to get this cleared up. But I think once they find, what's going to happen with Byfuglien, I think you'll see Cheveldayoff be aggressive. So one final thing I wanted to bring up, I think there's been a lot of talk about Russian players around the league, the thought of there are some potential free agents over in Russia, and I'm hearing a lot about GMs, going over and taking a look at these Russian free agents. So we could see next year maybe 5, 6, 7 new Russian players kind of joining the league.
Here's one of these trends again. I see what happens, but everybody jumps on these things. We got to go over and get these Russian players. And I mean, if they can't believe that where they've been, all of a sudden they grow them in a garden someplace. No,
you're right. But anyway, that's our program today. I'm Alan. He's Laidlaw. We're Laidlaw and Alan. We'll be back on Wednesday.
Wednesday, guys.